There are so many rods that absolutely need more love in Roblox Fisch. I'm talking about rods that are really good, but nobody ever talks about them or like tells us how good they are, but even though they're really good rods. But guess what? That is going to change because I am going to be talking about the 10 most underrated rods in Roblox Fisch. But yeah, let's get right into it. If you guys agree that these rods are underrated, you gotta subscribe. Let's get right into it. Number 10 is a rod that definitely needs a buff, but is still underrated because it has a use that is actually pretty useful. I am talking about a rod that you can buy for 15,000 credits, the magnet rod. If you guys didn't know, the magnet rod is the best rod that you can actually use to catch items in crates in the ocean, which is just cool. I mean, back when it was the winter event, you could use this to catch a ton of Christmas gifts and literally stack your inventory up with enchant relics. Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore, but the magnet rod is still useful. I think it actually needs a buff or maybe a price increase and a buff. I would honestly be fine for that. I would be fine with that because it is a cheap rod, but overall, I do think the magnet rod is a pretty underrated rod, but not super underrated because it is kind of trash, which is why I put it at number 10. But this next rod is not trash at all. I'm talking about the avalanche rod for a cost of only 35,000, which is 10,000 more than the Arctic rod. This rod is super good with a lure speed of 40%, 68% luck, 0.15 control, 10% resilience, and a max kilogram limit of 65,000. This rod is the true ambassador of the Arctic rod. This rod is the true Arctic rod replacement. Yes, it's 10,000 more, but it's basically what the Arctic rod used to be before it got nerfed. And I almost hear nobody talking about this rod. Even when I made my video about Arctic rod replacements, I forgot to talk about this rod, even though this is actually pretty much the best replacement for the Arctic rod. It's just 10,000 more. Technically, the Depth Seeker rod is it's only 5,000 more than this one, and it is a little bit better. But overall, since this rod does not get talked about enough, I would say it is a very underrated rod, which is why it takes my number 9 spot. And speaking about rods that are similar to the Arctic rod, the Ice Warper's rod has a lure speed of 50%, 60% luck, 0.15 control, 20% resilience, and a max kilogram limit of 75,000. And guys, yes, this rod costs 65,000, which is a little bit pricey. I think this rod is underrated. Yes, you do have to complete a lever puzzle to finish it, but it's honestly not that hard. And even though it costs 65,000, and I would say the Champion's rod is better, this rod literally never gets talked about, so it's a little bit underrated to me. The Champion's rod is well rated. This one, since I literally never ever hear anyone talking about the Ice Warper's rod, it's a little bit underrated. Okay, I mean, let's show this rod a little bit of love, guys. Come on. And speaking about a little bit of love, this rod does not deserve a little bit of love. This rod deserves a ton of love. I'm talking about the volcanic rod. Yes, it costs 300,000, but it is the best value rod in the entire game. I mean, it is one of the top 10 money-making rods in the entire game, while being cheaper than some of like the best rods in the entire game. And I mean way cheaper. It's only 300,000 credits. The only thing bad about this rod is it's 30% lure speed, but if you get hasty and you use seaweed, the rod literally insta-catches with a 90% luck, 0.1 control, 15% resilience, and can catch any fish with its infinite max kilogram limit. This rod's insane. And for that reason, I put it at my number 7 spot in the video. This rod's super underrated. Go and buy it right now. And speaking about rods you should buy right now, if you have other rods like the Kraken rod, the what's another one, the Tempest rod, or even the Zeus rod, honestly, you shouldn't get this rod. But if you are a little bit short on money, there's a small rod called the Abyssal Spectre rod that is actually the cheapest out of all the Atlantis rods. It only costs 1 million credits, and with a lure speed of 60%, 90% luck, 0.3 control, which is absolutely insane, 70% resilience, which is, oh my goodness, that's so high, and an infinite max kilogram limit. This rod is actually really underpriced. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the highest resilience in the entire game, maybe besides the brick rod, but yeah, that's insane. And no, I was wrong. The brick rod only has 35% resilience, so that just proves how amazing this rod is for only costing 1 million. And yeah, you should get this rod if you are a little bit short, but you do want an Atlantis rod. And speaking about Atlantis rods, number 5 is one of the most underrated rods. Yes, one of the most underrated rods in Atlantis. I am talking about the Kraken rod. Nobody talks about this rod enough. I mean, it has I think it's either a 5 or 10% chance to literally make your fish cost 10 times more, which is already a great ability. And every 50 catches, you have a guaranteed chance to catch either a legendary, mythical, or an exotic fish. And even putting the passives aside, brother, take a look at the stats with a 60% lure speed, 185% luck, 0.2 control, 15% resilience, and 115,000 max kilogram limit. This rod is absolutely insane, and for its price, it's honestly super good, and nobody ever talks about the Kraken rod. I mean, they're always talking about the Zeus rod, and we might get into the Zeus rod later, but yeah, Kraken rod, super good. And speaking about rods that are underrated and super good, the Rod of the Exalted One. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys know, oh yeah, it's the best one for getting exalted relics. Not just that. The Rod of the Exalted One, take a look at its stats. Do not play with these stats, you guys. With a 55% lure speed, if you get hasty, it's an insta catch, 170% luck, way better than the Rod of the Depths, 0.15 control, and 20% resilience. Once again, better than the Rod of the Depths, and a 70,000 max kilogram limit, meaning it can catch megalodons. And I don't think people look at these stats enough of this rod, because it's really good. And yes, it's a little bit hard to get, but honestly, it's literally free. The rod is technically free. If you get all the enchant relics, the rod is technically free, which is why this is a really underrated rod, to me at least. And that's why I took my number 4 spot. Speaking about rods that are taking spots, this rod, the third best rod, well, not best, but most underrated rod in the entire game, only costs 1 million credits. Yes, I'm talking about the Rod of, not the Rod of, but the Leviathan's Fang rod, with a lure speed of 70%, 180% luck, 0.1 control, and yes, only 5% resilience, but a max kilogram limit of infinite. And not only that, it has a special ability which makes you catch Scyllas like 50% faster, and every time you're on a Scylla, it buffs the resilience by 50%, making this, in my opinion, the best possible rod that you can use if you're just trying to catch Scyllas and possibly go AFK. Yeah, honestly, this rod's super underrated. Yeah, the lure speed's kind of slow, but if you get seaweed on it and you get the resilience enchant, this rod's super good. Like, honestly, stop playing with this rod. It's really good. Speaking about rods that are really good, but also pretty cheap, this next rod is the cheapest one in the entire video. Well, besides the Rod of the Exalted One, because it's technically free. I'm talking about the brick rod with a lure speed of 0%, which is a little bit underwhelming, 75% luck, 0.35% control, 35% resilience, and an infinite max kilogram limit. The brick rod is one of the coolest looking rods, first of all. Second of all, you can catch a really cool mutation called the studded mutation. And third of all, you can catch basically any fish you want. Yes, it has a slow lure speed, so I would recommend getting seaweed as well as getting hasty on it. But this rod's super underrated. Never ever do I see people fishing with it, especially beginners. Like, if you are a beginner, you should 100,000% try to get the brick rod, because it's cheap and really good for its price. And speaking about rods that are really good, this next rod is probably the most controversial, and yes, it is my number 1. I'm talking about the Zeus rod, all right? I don't care. You can flame me in the comments, but even after this rod has gotten nerfed, oh my goodness, it's still one of the best rods in the entire game. It is the second best money-making rod in the entire game, only second to the best rod, which is the Ethereal Prism rod that costs 15 million. Guys, Zeus rod barely costs 2 million. It's literally like, I think it's like 1.7 million. And yes, this rod is still super OP. And I'm sure a lot of you guys already knew that, but ever since it got nerfed, some people have been saying, oh, the Zeus rod's trash, yada yada. Guys, the Zeus rod is still good. You better still take advantage of this rod before it gets a double nerf. Anyways, all right, guys, that was my top 10 list of the most underrated rods in all of Roblox Fish. If you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Peace.